George treated the body of his own granddaughter like that of a beloved family cat.
Wow.
Definitely just like, that's what grandfathers always do, especially grandfathers that used to be cops. They always do that.
Yeah, they always try to make an accident look like a murder.
So this really
That's what
came
they
out
do.
of nowhere, though. This whole story came out of absolute nowhere. So it totally shattered all of the previous beliefs. Huh?
Yeah, totally.
Wow.
This was a brand new storyline. George then supposedly transported the body in the canvas bag, dropped it in the wooded area near his house on his way to work, and went about his day.
Wow.
And that is when Casey took off for a month. Now, there are a few interesting things to say about the pool theory. First, let's examine that very first 911 call. If Cindy Anthony knew about the pool accident, why would she make the multiple calls to 911? Why would she do the tough love call? Why would she do the second call? Why would she do the third call saying it smells like a damn dead body out there?
That was a euphemism for a dorm room.
It was euphemism for a dorm room. Remember that.
Well, here's the answer. If there's one thing we know about the Anthonys, it's that they are not very clever when it comes to plans. In other words, that call was not the devious groundwork for a grand alibi.
Absolutely not. If you listen to the calls, it sounds like a flustered woman. She had to call 3 different times because she had to make good on the other facetious, like, we're going to do a grandstanding, I'm going to teach my daughter a lesson call that was going to be a whole theatrical movement to, oh shit, this is actually a real thing that I've been ignoring. That's what I purposely have been ignoring. And they all just fall in line with Casey's lies. Casey develops the story. Well, I'm going to chart in my mind is that I watched and listened to the interview footage from the first police investigation in 2008 from George, Lee, and Casey.
Lee being the brother.
And you watch their stories solidify. You watch the Cindy stories solidify as it goes. They build it over time. Baez dropped this shit on them as they were going into court.
So this was Baez's idea. This was not a Casey Anthony creation.
Well, here's what we're about to get into.
Ooh.
The drowning story didn't come until much, much later. And Cindy Anthony wasn't even told about the drowning story until 3 weeks before the trial began. That's a 3-year gap between discovery and trial that she wasn't supposedly told what actually happened to her granddaughter. Second, for 5 days in 2009, Casey Anthony shared a jail dorm with a woman named April Whalen. On Christmas Day, 2007, the body of April Whalen's 15-month-old son was found drowned in the family pool by April's father. An oddly similar story.
Okay.
No, it's just parallel thinking, dog meat. That's just what it is. There's no such thing as plagiarism. She maybe is close to a Carlos Mencia move.
Right.
But there's many different material that can be made for many different walks of life.
You're equating someone stealing a joke to stealing a storyline about a child that's been murdered.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, it seems like a lot of people killing their kids there in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not hanging out at a Dunkin' Donuts, except for a fact you probably hear the same stories.
Yeah.
Like in the dining area of a Dunkin' Donuts.
The people who sit at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, I've done that before.
Yeah, I fell asleep at a booth once.
And third, a PI who worked on the Anthony case said that he was the one who actually came up with the drowning story after looking at aerial photographs of the Anthony home in a tabloid. He said that he was looking at the photograph and he noticed that the pool ladder was down.
Ah.
And this PI, Dominique Casey, no relation, said he, Casey Anthony, and Jose openly discussed Casey's guilt. And the drowning story was agreed upon in a brainstorming session between the three.
Wow.
But there was another PI too named Jim Hoover. This is the problem with PIs. I love them. Again, I'm going to go back into it. It's my fallback plan. It's what I want to do. But they're not reliable.
No.
Because you know who becomes private investigators?
Who?
People like me.
Oh,
People that tell stories for a living and they're cash hungry and they want to. This is what they do.
Yeah.
They are for hire.
Yeah.
So they have no bosses. Like
Yeah.
I listened to an interview with the police with Jim Hoover, who was the other PI that they had hired to work with that was Dominic's partner. And he's just like, they literally was like, so who do you work for, Jim? He's like, me? I work for nobody. And I was just like, whoa. Like when he said that, I was just like, this is fucking awesome. But then he goes on to say that they had a lot of talk about this. And it'll be interesting about how George and Cindy were both heavily focused on not throwing Casey under the bus, but it was a family thing.
So back to the trial. With the death out of the way, Baez moved on to the discovery of the body. He claimed that Roy Kronk, the utility worker who found the remains, had moved the remains from another location, staging the whole thing for fun and profit.
He cronked it up.
He pulled a cronk, which is moving the bones of a child from one place to
It's
another.
a very specific thing, but it does happen.
Now, Kronk did admit that he joked to his coworkers about hitting the lottery by finding this dead little girl, urging them to not tell any of his ex-wives.
Well, that is a strange bit. It's a strange skit that he came to work with that day.
He's a nighttime security officer. You know, like he's just got a lot of. We're dealing with a lot of. There's a lot of Kados
Right. Yeah,
in
there
this
are.
case.
Now, do you think his coworkers laughed? Because that's what matters the most. That's classic Kronk.
And Kronk's estranged son did say Kronk called him in November, telling him that his old man was going to be famous.
For finding a dead girl.
And yes, all of his ex-wives described Kronk as inappropriate with children, violent towards women, and undoubtedly capable of Kaylee's murder. However, it seems like Kronk was just an idiot piece of shit looking for a payday and an excuse to talk to the kids who didn't want to talk to him anymore, kind of like the wrestler.
Oh,
Good.
like the wrestler got
Don't
him back in the game.
equate-
So
wrestler
this
entertained
child's corpse helped
dozens.
him become a better father. So this is technically Mrs. Doubtfire 4. There are several different Mrs. Doubtfire sequels in this.
There is nothing more Florida than finding a decomposing corpse of a child and being like, hit pay dirt. It is like, where is the compassion here?
Yes,
Come
just
on.
because he looked for things with his piss, like Gerard Depardieu looking for a bathroom in the dark, does not mean that he's a murderer.
No, none of this means that he's a murderer.
No, he's just-
Nor does it mean that he moved the location of the body.
Right.
What he did move, though, was the skull when he picked it up by the eye socket. And this gave the defense their first shot across the bow when it came to forensics. Since Ray had tampered with the scene, the defense said the whole damn thing was contaminated.
And all he could say was, "I'm sorry." He's just like, he kept going like, "I'm sorry, I did it. I didn't know. I just did it. I was curious. I wanted to make sure." And I was like, honestly, when it comes down to it, if it's a skull, I'm just going to make up that I'm sure. Like, I don't need to actually look at it. I'll tell the story and then let someone else tell me that I'm wrong.
But that wasn't even the biggest bombshell from the opening statements. Because all this shit, this is all just opening statements here. Jose wrapped up his opening statement with another page taken from the Menendez handbook. Molestation.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Always with the molestation.
They didn't molest. But the problem is that they told them as they were going into that day that they're like, just so you know, like it was like a yada, yada, yada. The prosecution turned to George Anthony. He's like, they're going to accuse you of molesting Casey. You have to not react, because a part of what being in because both they were not only witnesses in the trial, but they were family members of the accused, so they were allowed to be in the courtroom as it happened. But also anybody who's in the courtroom, which is why my stupid friend got hit with a what's the term, contempt of court, was because he made a fucking face because he gave the finger. So George Anthony is forced to just sit there and not react, which people on the whole don't really understand. So this bombshell's dropped saying that he molested, very graphic the way he spells it out too, like very, very graphic to try to get the jury's attention. And then you see George Anthony sitting there like a stone, and of course people are immediately like, look at that sociopath. But it's like he just wasn't allowed to make a face, and I'm certain he was in a form of shock.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So now, were they in on the accusations there? Were George and Cindy like, all right, well, that's fine. We'll take the hit here.
Hell
Or
yeah.
was it just like,
Hell yeah.
we got a pool idea. You molested her. And we're going to move on to like, why would she party?
No, they did not know. They did not know at all. Like, Baez came out and he said that George Anthony had sexually molested Casey Anthony starting when she was 8 years old.
You know what George Anthony should have done there?
What?
Check, please.
Check, please, get me out of here.
Yeah. Baez said that Casey had been molested throughout her childhood and adolescence. This is why Casey showed no emotion during those 31 days. Baez claimed that years of hiding the sexual abuse going on at home from the rest of the world trained Casey to put her emotions in the back seat where no one could see them, and the death of her daughter was just another family secret to bear.
So Baez just basically realized as a defense attorney, you can just make it up.
You can just say it.
Just say anything.
Yeah, well, because the burden of proof isn't on the defense.
Right.
It's on the prosecution.
So we just Alex Jones to the whole thing.
And there's no way to disprove what he's saying.
Again,
Right.
the
Yeah.
power of lies. You just got to say it, and then everybody's got to fucking be back on their heels trying to prove that you're wrong. And so
Right.
then he pulls the fucking brother into it too, who's the one dude that didn't do anything.
Nothing.
He was just trying to live his life.
Yeah, he said that the brother had also been inappropriate with Casey, and it was a whole familial incest thing.
Jeez.
And so it seems after this that Baez was going to hit the prosecution hard with these molestation claims just the whole time. Because after all, like, the molestation, that was the centerpiece of the Menendez brothers' defense.
Right.
But here, Baez put his own spin on the tactic. He never mentioned it again for the entirety of the trial.
So it's kind of like he had no evidence for it and did nothing to back it up. And it's interesting the way you say he had his own spin on it. It sounded like he just started with the plan and then Casey Anthony'd his way to the end of the trial.
Strange.
No witnesses, no experts, no mention of it in any cross-examinations. The prosecution brought it up.
Because now they're forced to.
Right.
Now they're forced to. They have to.
Yeah, now they have to. Like, their first
Kind of
wit-
validates the whole thing too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I say a thing real quick? I want to believe in victims, right? I want to believe that people come forward and say that they've been attacked, they've been sexually molested. I want to believe these people that are victims of assault. The problem with Casey Anthony is that she has already lived an entire lie for so long that it gets to this point where where's the line? Where is the line between you have been proven to be a liar again and again and again? This is a thing now that we are now forced to go examine because we want to believe victims, but you're a piece of shit that makes this harder on everybody else.
And the defense is also rolling the lie into the lie. Like, they're rolling all of the lies into the whole molestation thing because, like, well, okay, yes, she's a liar. She's been a liar and been proven to be a liar over and over again, but not this time. Because this time, the thing that we're saying happened, that's why she lies. She's lying about everything else, but she's not lying about this. And this thing that she's not lying about is why she lies about everything else.
You know when you said to other lies, made me think of Cinnabons. Isn't that weird?
Disgusting.
I thought of a Cinnabon.
Disgusting.
Now, the prosecution's first witness was George Anthony. They had to, of course they had to. They had to
Jeez.
open by asking him if he had ever molested his daughter.
Right.
And he's like, no, of course not. He's like, no, sir, no, of course not. But when it was Baez's turn for the cross-examination, everyone expected him to just barrage George with questions about the molestation accusations. But instead, Baez went for George's 2009 suicide attempt. See, not too long after Kaylee's body was found, George, just heartbroken over the hard reality that his granddaughter was indeed dead and that his daughter was probably responsible for it, he went to a hotel in Daytona Beach, took a bunch of pills, drank a lot of beer, and left a note that said, I needed to go be with Kaylee.
Oh my goodness.
Horrific.
Daytona Beach.
Horrific time in this man's life.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, if it was just him hanging out with Zenaida Gonzalez at a pool, that'd be a different story altogether, but it wasn't.
It was not. In defense,
Wow.
they claimed that the suicide attempt was done out of guilt.
Did he I mean, he must have told people about the suicide
But
attempt, or they found him?
He
or?
went missing. He
I
he essentially went missing. He sent a bunch of texts to people saying like goodbye. I'm gonna do it. And then the cops felt like they triangulated his cell phone and they found him before and were able to like pump his stomach and all that. But the defense said that George had tried to kill himself because of guilt, because he had disposed of the body. And Baez, I mean, he just hammered away at this poor grieving grandfather, and all the while, Casey Anthony sat there just stone fucking cold.
I mean, but also, if you're George, you don't want to see your daughter go to prison for life, and
No.
she's facing capital murder. So
After the molestation thing, he was edging a little bit closer towards send her away.
yeah, he was getting a little upset
Because
huh?
he realized what he had finally got himself caught in. He said something in his first police interview where he was just like, you know how hard it is to live with two women. Like, he said this to the cops, and they're all like, yeah, George. I do believe that up to this point, he thought that Casey had something to do with it, but he was holding out all hope that they said all the time that maybe, just maybe, there's some kind of extenuating circumstance. There's somebody else involved. By the time that this happened, once that dropped on his lap, he was like, oh, fuck. My daughter's a stone cold psychopath. My wife, who I've said several times is the mirror image of my daughter, is also a psychopath. He's fucking stud.
Right.
Like a motherfucker. And part of this has got to do with his silence their entire lives.
Well,
and the fact that he never went Liam Neeson. This is the other thing about watching the trial for fucking hours and hours. I start getting angrier and angrier at George, Cindy, and Lee. Nobody cared about the kid enough to break through the silence that was in that house because no one wanted to talk to Casey Anthony about her fucking lies because they were afraid of setting her off. So what they did was let this happen in a way. Well,
I don't know if Lee did anything. He's just kind of like, what? My family's weird.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to. My family's weird. I don't know. I mean, George was half right. Go to Daytona and get smashed. Just get drunk. But I mean, not with the pills. Don't do the pills.
So after the prosecution got George Anthony out of the way, they went into the lies, the lack of emotion, and all the party girl stuff, all of which we covered on the last episode. And then they got into the car forensics, going through all the evidence we also talked about in the first episode, step by step, smell, stain, hair, etc. What we didn't talk about, though, were the infamous Googles.
You just sounded like my mom describing the internet.
It's full of, what is this, infamous Google? What, Henry, what's Google?
Henry Thomas, how do I search this?
It's like, go ogle, I don't know.
So in March of 2008, months before the death, the prosecution claimed that someone in the Anthony house had made searches using Internet Explorer for the word chloroform 84 times.
That's a lot.
If she did it.
This, combined with the chloroform particles found in the trunk of Dr. Arpad Voss, was where the prosecution drove home their claim that Kaylee Anthony was knocked out using chloroform. After that was the duct tape. There were 3 pieces present, although investigative reports and trial testimony went back and forth between the tape being found on the skull and being found near the skull.
It's really difficult to pinpoint whether or not the duct tape was attached to the skull because all of the pictures I could find of the remains, and this is disgusting, they're all blurred because it's a child, so they don't want you to see where it actually was attached. It seems like it got caught in whatever was left of the remains' hair, which is very sad, but I don't know. The fact that duct tape is there at all.
So even so, the attempted knockout line came from the medical examiner, Dr. G, who is now 92 episodes into her show Dr. G Medical Examiner on the Discovery Health Channel.
No kidding.
My name is Dr. Randolph Gorilla, and they made me change my name in order to have this television show. So hi, welcome to Dr. G Medical Examiner, where today I'm going to learn how to have sex with a woman.
Dr. G is a woman.
Hey, all right.
Oh.
Good for her.
That's nice.
Dr. G said there is no reason to put duct tape on the face after they die. They thought, the prosecution thought, like, fuck yeah, that's the line. That's what's going to get them. And Dr. G also said that while one piece would have been enough to suffocate the girl, Casey used 3 to make damn sure it worked. First piece went over the mouth, second over the nose, and just to be thorough, the third covered both. When the prosecution rested, they thought they'd hit one out of the park. There's no way this is going to end in any way but victory.
Right.
That was before they were introduced to a little catchphrase Jose Baez cooked up to hammer away at that whole reasonable doubt thing. Fantasy forensics.
He then pitched that show to the CW as a reality show with celebrities doing forensics at the morgue. Brian Austin Green hanging out like they had a hot tub in the morgue.
Look at that. Beverly Hills 90210. Don't mind if I do.
So immediately, Baez went to work dismantling the forensic evidence put forth by the prosecution.
They got branding. He got like little code words. They got a great story. Interesting, huh?
He started with the smell science of Dr. Arpad Voss, the guy with the paint cans.
I'll make any smell in the world. Just let me have my labs. Do you want a fart smell? I can make it, but not with my butt, with chemicals. Do you want a broccoli smell? I'm going to need some broccoli.
It does seem like there's a little wiggle room to discredit this guy with the paint.
Sure.
And everything.
Yeah, there is. Well, but I mean, Baez pointed out that this is the first time Dr. Voss's method had ever been used in a criminal court. And furthermore, Voss didn't even have a doctorate in chemistry. His specialization was in anthropology. But to be fair, Dr. Voss's work was legitimate. He worked at the famous and respected Body Farm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and his work on decompositional chemistry was published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Forensic Studies. This guy wasn't fucking around.
Strange guy to have a first date with. Just be like, what's the biggest
I imagine
accolade?
it's very annoying. It's that guy, and also what we were watching Blue Planet is this guy that he spends his life using high-powered microphones to listen to choral, and it's him just going like, "It's amazing the sounds you can get from the choral," and it cuts to the sounds, and it just.
I mean, it's technically interesting, but also like,
Shut
were you
up.
ever an amateur wrestler? Like,
Coming to Netflix this March, the new limited 4-part British miniseries, Collateral, starring Carey Mulligan, John Sim, and Nicola Walker. Set over the course of 4 days in London, Collateral explores the spiraling repercussions surrounding the fatal, seemingly random shooting of a pizza delivery boy. Detective Inspector Kip Glaspie, played by Carey Mulligan, refuses to accept that this is a random act of violence and is determined to find out if there's a darker truth. As a result, she uncovers a tangled conspiracy involving drug dealers, smugglers, and spies. And she reveals the murder to be connected to larger political conspiracies circling immigration and refugees in Europe and the UK. Written by Oscar-nominated The Hours and The Reader scribe David Hare, and directed by S.J. Clarkson, this contemporary thriller maintains an underlying immigration storyline that makes it timely and relevant. You don't want to miss Collateral, streaming March 9th, only on Netflix. But according to Baez, Dr. Voss's technique did not pass the Dalbert test.
what the hell is the Dalbert test?
As far as my understanding of it goes, the Dalbert test...
It has to involve Velcro shoes. I don't know why, but I feel like Velcro shoes is involved.
The Dalbert test is applied to the Dalbert standard.
What?
The Dalbert standard is tested when an attorney raises a Dalbert motion.
Yep.
And the Dalbert motion comes when an attorney believes an expert may be unqualified.
What's a Dalbert?
Well, hi, hello, my name is Francis Dalbert, and how we can tell if this scientist is telling the truth or not is that I will lay down in this pool of water, and if I...
And an expert, and the other side is like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. They raise a Dalbert motion.
They should call it a Dauber motion. Remember him from Coach?
I love Dauber.
He was the best.
Now, to counter Dr. Voss, the defense brought in a chemistry professor from Florida International University named Dr. Ken Furton.
I do believe that Florida International University is taught in the living room of a man's house. Like, this is not...
I have not heard many good things about FIU. I know Isaiah Thomas was the coach there for a little while. Didn't go well. No.
Dr. Furton testified that there was no hard consensus as to what chemicals are typical to human decomposition. Furthermore, Judge Perry ruled that the jurors would not be allowed to smell the air samples to decide for themselves whether the trunk truly smelled like death or like a sack of rotten pizza. Then Baez took aim at Voss's claim about chloroform. Voss said that trace amounts of chloroform are usually found in the air in parts per trillion, and that's not uncommon. In the air sample from the trunk, though, it was found in parts per million.
See, this is where trials just get boring. This is just where you just go and you're like, okay. As a juror, just be like, I need lunch. I know that I need lunch and lunch is provided. When is it come? Because I know that every hour and a half they get a break.
Juror Zabrowski, can you stop licking and eating your own chest hair, please?
Well, maybe if there was some kind of hors d'oeuvre or some kind of snack bowl, I would be able to do my job as a member of a jury of this guilty woman's peers. Am I excused?
Did you bring your own pig in a blanket today, Mr.
Yes, it's a hog and a comforter.
Well, Baez countered this whole parts per million versus parts per trillion thing with a guy who said it wasn't really that weird that there was so much chloroform, as chloroform is present in plenty of everyday items, including cleaning supplies.
Cleaning
I
products,
see.
maybe. Maybe there's.
She was cleaning her Pontiac Sunfire, but she just missed the rotten pizza. She was just cleaning around the pizza, be like, that's part of the trunk.
Before the pizza.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
this is all before.
She's innocent.
I see.
Now, as far as the Google searches went, Cindy Anthony, fully behind her daughter on a lie once more, said that she was the one who did the search. And even then, it was more of a curious accident.
It's so stupid. This doesn't make any sense.
I think this makes sense, actually.
Curious accident.
See, the Anthony family dog had a habit of eating bamboo leaves off a bamboo plant in the backyard, and the dog was seeming a little lethargic. So Cindy was wondering if the leaves had anything to do with it.
Do
So
we know if the dog wasn't a panda?
the dog was not a panda.
Okay.
Dog just a dog. Dogs get sleepy.
Yeah.
That's what dogs do. They sleep 14 hours a day.
Not a panda.
Cindy was wondering if the leaves had anything to do with it, so she sat down to Google chlorophyll.
No, she wouldn't. She would Google, because I know how moms Google, and how even myself Google, be like, dog ate bamboo leaves. Bad? Question mark? That's how you do. That's how you Google search something like that.
All right, looking for chlorophyll.
Looking for chlorophyll.
You know what it's more like? All right. You got it.
Come on, you
know what
can
I'm
do
talking about.
Oh, come on, finish it up.
More like borophyll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Oh, they said we couldn't have fun anymore. Look at that.
Yeah.
But when the autofill showed chloroform, Cindy clicked on that out of curiosity.
Oh.
She took one quick look at one site about the uses of chloroform in the 19th century and then moved on to her chlorophyll research.
Okay.
The prosecution had quite a few things to say about this claim. They said that, first of all, Cindy was at work that day. Both time cards and computer records show that, at the very least, someone was using Cindy's credentials on the day in question. Second, there was the 84 times claim. Remember that? Yeah.
Right, I
Search
remember
for
that.
84 times.
Yeah.
Why would someone Google chloroform out of curiosity 84 times?
84 times.
They have OCD.
Could be.
They're in a deep panic spiral, and they're just typing chloroform over and over again, or they're writing it on the walls.
Or they just didn't do it.
Oh.
See,
I like the defense in this. What if they didn't do it?
They actually have proof behind this one.
Oh.
See, that first claim about Cindy Anthony being at work, you can argue, like, maybe, Cindy Anthony went home and, stayed logged in at work, and maybe one of her coworkers was using her credentials or whatever. But the 84 times claim, here's a simple answer on that one. The software the prosecution used had made an error.
Oh.
They were telling the truth. The Anthony family was actually telling the truth when they said they only searched chloroform once.
So tired.
There you
It makes me
go.
so tired. It's so boring, hours and hours. This is why people go to Nancy Grace, because she's making it fun, and she's saying something like, "That bitch, another day of testimony from that bitch, my favorite bitch."
84. So we got a little truth here for the Anthony family.
Yeah, the truth comes out that this does go
How
on
does
the Anthony family.
prosecutor mess this up so bad?
You have no idea.
All right.
We're going to get into it later. Then Jose went for the duct tape. He said the state had used quote-unquote junk science in their claims, pointing to the fact that there were no fingerprints present on the duct tape. However, the FBI, they weren't expecting fingerprints. This tape had been outside for months in 90-degree plus temperatures and Florida floods. Right. Anything like fingerprints or oils would have washed off long before the body was found. But that didn't stop Baez. He doubled down, saying that not only should there have been fingerprints, but there should have been DNA on both sides of the tape as well. No, it wasn't murder. It was Dad's old put the body in the bag and tape it up routine that produced the duct tape.
It doesn't make any sense. It was just wrapped in plastic. It was put in her poor little girl was put in a diaper bag. If there is duct tape remotely attached to the face of a dead little girl, you think it to have something to do with murder and not have... It's just so... upsetting.
Henry,
think you're
I have
listening-
something for you.
Uh-oh.
What do you say about the duct tape being on the face?
If it's near the face, then that's murder.
Well, I say maybe it wasn't near the face.
Uh-oh.
See, there was that claim that the tape was holding the mandible and the skull together. But Baez said that tape was just put there by cops during transit to keep it together. And
No, they wouldn't do that.
If you
I almost
notice-
fell out of my chair. I
And-
literally just almost fell out of my chair.
the prosecution, even during the prosecution's turn, there was no consensus as to if the tape was found on the face or found near the body. So,
Bungles.
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 Wow.
Many bungles. And all this was put into perspective by German Dr. Werner Spitz.
So yeah,
I like 'em.
I don't applaud too hard, Gessel.
Werner Spitz?
Werner Spitz.
Spitz. Okay.
This guy is a classic. He is very, very funny. Yes, you'll get into it. He's been involved in crazy cases, but he definitely talks like this. He's like very like what you'd expect a German doctor.
Spitz has actually been involved in an insane amount of cases, from the assassination of JFK to Phil Spector to, of course, the O.J. Simpson civil trial.
Would just sound like he's becoming more of a suspect. As far as I'm concerned, he's involved in all these cases.
But before you peg Spitz as a scientific spoiler, know that his only work on the O.J. civil trial was to testify that Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson did indeed die from multiple stab wounds.
This is very easy stuff to do. I mean, I could have done that.
Yeah.
They got stabbed.
Yeah, they were stabbed.
In the case of Casey Anthony, though, Spitz took the autopsy performed by Dr. G apart, piece by piece. Not that that was a very difficult thing to do, because he was right. The investigators half-assed damn near everything in this case. Spitz is not a bad man. In fact, he's one of the most respected forensic scientists in the entire world. He's just a guy who can't stand to see bad work go unremarked.
Right.
He took the money, sure, but he just gave his honest opinions.
He's the bummer.
He's a bummer.
He's a bummer, but he's a scientist. And so scientists are technically supposed to be bummers, and we need to count on them being bummers.
Right. So he was just pissed off that they messed up so bad in the process.
Pretty much,
Yes. They fucked up everything because they thought they had a slam dunk case.
yeah. They got cocky.
Today's other sponsor for Last Podcast on the Left is Audible. Audiobooks are great for helping you be a better you, whether you want to feel healthier, get motivated, or learn something new. And with an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more, Audible has all the audio content you need to start your year on the right foot. Try books like In Cold Blood, my favorite book, and a must-read or must-listen for any true crime fan. For a fiscal you, go for Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Crypto Assets, The Innovative Investor's Guide to Bitcoin and Beyond, or You Are a Badass at Making Money. For a healthy you, go for The Sleep Revolution, The Power of Habit, or The Obesity Code. For a successful you, go for The 4-Hour Workweek, Grit, or How to Be a Boss. For inspired you, go for Braving the Wilderness, Daily Self-Discipline, or The Power of Habit. Whether it's on your phone, through your car, from a tablet, or at home on an Amazon Echo, you can get through tons of books while doing almost anything. And Audible even lets you switch left off. Start a 30-day trial and your first audiobook is free. Go to audible.com/LEFT or text LEFT to 500-500. That's audible.com/LEFT or text LEFT to 500-500 for a 30-day trial and free first audiobook. Audible, you can do it with audiobooks.
And the other scientist brought in by the defense was solid as well. Dr. Lawrence Koblinski was actually an early proponent of using DNA evidence in a courtroom, but even he had to admit that unless there's a root on a hair, a mitochondrial match is the best you can do. So that means that, in court he had to come in and say, like, yeah, it's mitochondrial, and yeah, it was untreated, and yeah, it was around the same length as Kaylee's hair, but we can't say conclusively that it belongs to Kaylee.
But we can. But can't we though?
That's
like
the
if I
thing.
was the prosecutor, I'd just be like, but can't we?
2 words. Consistent with.
That seems mean. It seems like a joke that people said about me. I don't like that actually at all.
It's fucked up because there's no body. Because there's no murder weapon, because the prosecution couldn't put together the story and the timeline with hardcore facts, the 31 days that it took for them to realize that she was missing changed everything. Like that's kind of what it did. Essentially, Florida ate the evidence.
Yeah.
The swamps hid the crimes for whoever did it.
They kept using the words consistent with because they didn't have the body. They didn't have the murder weapon. So all they couldn't say is. They just had to say consistent with. There was never anything conclusive for the jury. No CSI moment. And that bullshit helped Jose Baez mislead the jury into confusing a reasonable doubt with a reason to doubt, as O.J. Simpson prosecutor Marcia Clark put it in an article she wrote about the trial. Now, as I said before, the defense never again mentioned the molestation in the trial, not even in the closing statements. But there was one other thing they didn't mention at all during arguments as well: the drowning. No evidence was put forth and no questions were asked, almost as if they'd never even brought it up in the first place.
Wow.
Did you try to read Baez's book, Presumed Guilty?
No.
I tried to read it, and it really made me upset. Like, I couldn't get through it. I'm trying to be impartial because she is innocent.
She's not innocent. She's not guilty. It's two different things.
She's not guilty. Oh, but it's. I want to come out with a clear mind, but it really comes down to the fact that I don't know, man. They couldn't put the story together.
Yeah.
They just couldn't.
It's very important.
But Jose Baez could.
Right.
Especially in his closing arguments.
Okay.
So as far as the closing arguments went, the prosecution went first. They repeated their whole case and went through all the forensics once more, talked about the lying and the lack of emotion, and then rounded it all out with one question: whose life was better with Caylee Anthony dead? And this was followed by a slideshow of pictures of Casey dancing, the Bella Vita tattoo, and so on and so forth.
But also remember this. This is where they fucked up, obviously.
Right.
Because I am realizing, too, the deeper we go into this case, it is really difficult to tell people how to grieve and how to act.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that they pin this whole thing on essentially slut-shaming Casey and doing trying to paint her character is that they put it on a slippery slope because you had to deal with a bunch of people that all have to sit and think about, like, what would I be like in total pain? Most of the time, you want to try to act like nothing's happening. Like, Casey Anthony did it to a sociopathic, completely trashy level.
Who hasn't partied, you know?
Yeah, but the YouTube comments for each one of the police interviews I listened to with like Lee Anthony and George Anthony, everyone wants to snap to these judgment calls of like, how dare he laugh? How dare he act like this, act like it? So it's like, it's really difficult to pin down what human behavior is supposed to be like.
Absolutely.
And it's very difficult to just say, she just lied, and families sometimes just automatically fill in because essentially it's like it's like what AIDS does to the body. It's like the immune system, instead of helping you, is killing you.
It's interesting. You know, the prosecutors also made a huge mistake. Gift cards.
Yes.
If I was a juror, I would be like, and in my closing arguments, $25 gift card to Applebee's. And that's a lot, actually, at an Applebee's. That's a couple of margaritas and an appetizer. But I guess they weren't thinking like that.
Unlimited appetizers?
It depends. Yeah. Yeah. Depends what day or time you go.
I was said with such sadness.
Yes.
Yeah,
It is. Because it's always the good ones that are limited.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have the burrata tonight. Be like, then why you put it on the goddamn menu if you don't have enough for me and my fucking huge family?
Yeah, Ben wants a wonton taco. Say that 5 times fast. I'll take it.
So that was the prosecution.
All right.
Then the defense took their turn. Now, the reason why they didn't bring up the molestation in the closing arguments was because the judge forbade it. Judge Belvin made a good call here.
All right.
Because he said, you didn't put any evidence whatsoever forth. You didn't say anything about it during the trial, and you don't have any evidence to introduce in the closing arguments.
It's almost like they just said it.
It's as similar as if Baez opened and being like, and furthermore, George Anthony is Frankenstein's monster. You know what I mean? Like, how dare he is a part of the whims of Dr. Frankenstein, who we will hear from today in this courtroom. And he doesn't show up. Just a man in a fucking cryptic eye patch just sitting behind him.
But there was one tiny bit of evidence for the drowning. During closing statements, Jose showed a picture of Caylee Anthony at the back door of the Anthony house, opening it on her own. And in the background was the pool. Ooh. And with that, the defense rested.
They literally relaxed because they were all thinking about the pool.
Oh, that is nice.
So on July 4th, 2011, Independence Day, the case was placed in the hands of the jurors. After less than 11 hours, the verdict was returned. On the charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child, the jury found the defendant not guilty.
Not guilty.
No!
And that footage, when Casey hears the not guilty verdict, it takes a second for it to set in.
Yeah.
And then it's a really strange smile.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Well, yeah, because she doesn't have to have the mask on anymore.
It was
it's over.
odd. Yeah.
She smiles like you never go to like get a lot of things from like Target or Kmart and then they accidentally put like a spatula in there without charging you and then you can leave with it. It's like that kind of smile. Like,
You just walk a little bit faster to your car when you realize it.
She was, however, found guilty of lying to the cops. And for that, she was sentenced to 4 years in prison. However, since she'd been incarcerated for 3 years awaiting trial and had earned time off for good behavior, Casey Anthony was let out of jail 10 days after her sentence was handed down.
Wow.
When they asked jurors why, dear God, why did they let her go? They said it was because the prosecutors had not painted a picture.
Right.
There was evidence she lied and evidence she wasn't the greatest mom, but there was no clear-cut, there it is evidence that she was a murderer.
That's why sometimes every defense team has to have an artist. Just someone to be like, let's bring it together. Okay.
let's all do this. They need a director, they need a choreographer.
Yes.
But they need a pamphlet that they can hand out. But I don't think you're allowed to do that either.
No.
It's just, again, without a body, without a method of murdering, without all of this shit. It's like, and again, it's very difficult for anybody to swallow that a mother would kill her child. But they don't really understand how far and deep narcissism can go.
Yeah.
So basically, they got the party girl thing, but they didn't get the murderer part.
They didn't get
so
the
they missed the big one.
Dude, some of them even said they wished there was more evidence to put her away, that they believed she had actually killed her child, but the defense had introduced a reasonable doubt.
Right.
In other words, these jurors had something in common with Casey Anthony herself. They all thought they were being real fucking clever when in reality, they had no idea what they were doing.
Oh, it's like hosting a podcast.
Oh, yeah. I did grand jury duty here in Kings County, and I saw that on a regular basis. One example was they arrested this guy for heroin and marijuana in a vial, and the jury said, we're not going to charge him for the marijuana. We'll just charge him for the heroin. But that's the big one.
Yeah.
You know, but they were like, so basically you just took the leverage off the table to be like, we can charge you for the weed, we won't charge you for the heroin. But so anyway.
Yeah.
They overthought it. It was so stupid.
It's all about overthinking
Right.
it. They allowed Jose Baez to completely remove common sense from the equation, all while Jose was making them feel like they were being real goddamn smart with this decision. He gave them a reason to doubt, yes, but that doesn't mean that doubt was reasonable. So, speaking of people thinking they're being real goddamn smart, let's get into what I think happened.
Uh-oh.
Okay, now we're gonna let you just run through this very complicated theory of yours,
It's very
which I
simple.
like.
It's actually very simple.
Yeah, of course it is.
If this
But
all
when it comes down to it,
OJ did it, I'm not going to be happy.
well, I'll say a part of what this theory involves is, again, remember, are silent killers,
Like carbon monoxide?
like carbon monoxide and blood pressure. Yeah.
All right.
So here we go.
Okay. The Marcus Parks theory on Casey Anthony.
And I'm probably not the only person out there who has this theory, but it's mine nonetheless.
Okay.
Yeah, this
He's
is now
taking it.
ours. So I'm sorry, you're fucked.
I didn't double check to see if anybody else. I didn't have time to go through and see if anybody else is on the internet thought about this. But this is what I think.
All right.